see it's getting darker and darker, and there's just no way right now for these drivers to know exactly what's going to happen.
These guys are going to have to be really, really careful and tiptoe around the track. It's either not even 10 minutes into this race, and I feel like we've got enough strategy going on for a whole event, but still a long, long way to go.
There's Yellowstone, there's Yosemite, but for racing fans and for Grid Life's Elkhart Classic, the destination is Road America, the National Park of Speed.
Prix wide in the front of the field here. Look at Emil tab up the inside for the race lead. We head down to the first corner.
Has no idea what they're coming into. Look at this field. They're 2 wide, 3 wide, a couple places slipping.
Side by side for the race lead. 54, 48 through 3 and 4. Working lap number 60, 110 laps to go. Yusuf Ghali power move to the bottom of the racetrack, making the short way work. They're going to touch down the hill.
This will be a great run for Fuller here.
Yes, if we go ran off the track in the final quarter, that'll allow Fuller to get a massive.
Here he comes.
Does he have a look?
Oh, big block here by Sanfilippo. Into the grass goes Ben Fuller toward turn 1, and Sanfilippo hangs on. He's loose. No! And he crashes hard in the exit of turn number 2.
Don't try here, boys. They're going to do it.
Briscoe backs out. They touch. They're going to crash. Briscoe going to slam the attenuator hard into the wall, and Sarah Tesson hits him as well. And big damage on these cars. That's huge.
Before people are struggling for grip, going out of every single lane, even trying to then run. It's getting really insane.
Powered by AWS for the Intercontinental GT Challenge, powered by Pirelli and the Indianapolis 8-hour. We are 7 hours and 18 minutes into this 8-hour event.
John Miller way deep on the brakes to the inside of turn number 1 and 2. The spin, the 3 car gets turned around in front of the car.
James Houghton looking for a place to go, but he's got Austin Cobb to the inside. A bit of a gap behind. I think that's about 15th or 16th spot as they come out of turn 3. Big slide over this.
Getting a run. He's got it. Going to be a drag racing line. Final corner. Checkered flag waving. Here they come. At Virginia National Raceway. To the line. Thompson, Darling, door to door. Banging doors. Fender to fender. I can't believe what we just saw.
The Formula I F1 World Championship heads to its next round at Detroit Belle Isle. We've transitioned from Road America to Interlagos to Suzuka to Catalunya to Monza and all over the rest of the world. But today, we head back to the United States before a trip to Mount Panorama at Bathurst next week. Welcome to SimTV. My name's Kyle Heyer, joined this afternoon by 4-time IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge winner and 2-time TC America champion Tom O'Gorman. Tom, welcome to open wheel racing here on SimTV. This is, I believe, the first time you've announced this on this network, but welcome. We've got 2 25-minute races coming up, a bit of a different format today, but F1 racing at Detroit Belle Isle.
Something that's definitely exciting for me. Hi, Kyle. Thanks for having me for this open wheel series, and new but not any less exciting, and I think it's even more exciting to be at such a unique track here at Belle Isle. The list you just ran down of the season that they've run so far has been kind of a really strong list of tracks, but this is probably one of the most unique, next to maybe Bathurst, but this is going to be an extremely challenging one for these drivers, especially in cars this fast.
Danilo Sanfilippo pulling onto the racetrack right now. He and Marco at the top of the standings. The Fratelli Capone Corsa brothers have been killing it this season. But as they roll out on the racetrack right now, qualifying is already underway, and as always, you can find live timing and scoring at the link in the video description at simtvbroadcasting.com/timing. Warming up the tires, Detroit Belle Isle, Tom. This is a racetrack that's been around for quite some time in the U.S., but it's bumpy, it's very tight and narrow, and it's challenging to pass that. So a Formula One car is going to be ripping lap times just over a minute around here. How challenging is that to rip a Formula One car around a street circuit like this?
Well, this is a long track. It's a big track. You can see just how tight it is in certain places as we're in one of the tighter sections now down the long, wider back straightaway. But this is one of those tracks that I think the driver is racing the track every bit as much as they're racing the car. So you can see on the left side of your screen there may not be the biggest field you've ever seen, but this is absolutely going to be one of those races where the drivers are challenged every single corner. This is one of the more narrow sections of the track right here, as we ride along with Danilo Sanfilippo. It's just going to keep you on your toes the entire time. I wouldn't be surprised to see some attrition, some surprises because of how bumpy it is. You see the suspension just being worked all the way down these short straightaways and then a fast sweep onto the front straightaway. That's what's going to keep us on our toes today if the racing doesn't.
Well, the speeds that we see in Formula One, incredibly high, 180 miles an hour into most of the braking zones here, and the amount of downforce they have all the way out to the concrete. Could be a lot of fun to watch these cars this afternoon We head to Mount Panorama Bathurst next week. That track in some ways is even more daunting than this one, but I think there's a lot to be said about the drivers that can keep it off the concrete here tonight. So Danilo Sanfilippo right now, currently provisional pole sitter with a 106.471. Cody Sandwith in recent weeks has found a lot of speed in that number 32 car. His teammate, I don't believe, is here yet. Still a possibility that he might be here. The other thing to worry about is the format change this week. Typically, we run about an hour-long race with a knockout qualifying session. No knockout qualifying today. It's just 25 minutes of straight-up time trial leading into a 25-minute race. So we'll be done by about 3, or I should say, 2 p.m., 2:15-ish Eastern, 1:15 Central here today. And that was a bit of a bobble there for Sandwith.
And that's just a perfect indicator and depiction of how challenging this track is. You see there's almost no downtime, no time to rest. This is a short straightaway between turns 2 and 3 as Sandwith sweeps around another car on its warm-up. But there's pretty much only 2 spots where these drivers are going to get a moment to breathe. Sandwith is going to call this one a day back to the pit lane to reset. 18 minutes left to go in qualifying. But otherwise, it's frantic sawing at the wheel all the way around the track.
Certainly is. Jason Siemens now pulling on the racetrack in his number 15 Siemens Privateer team. You look at the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see the ticker. The drivers with the similar colored number boards, those are teammates. Grabowski and Bass on different teams with different shades of yellow, but Woodstrup, Siemens are teammates. Coteau and Whiting are teammates. Sanfilippo and Sanfilippo are teammates. So is Oliveira and Clavati at the bottom of the order right now. So we've got... we got 12 drivers lined up so far. Flavio Clavati and Jason Siemens and Steverson Oliveira are the only drivers not to have time so far in this qualifying session.
Something that'll be interesting to watch as this week unfolds is how the drivers have had to change their setups coming into Belle Isle. As you mentioned, it's an incredibly bumpy track, and we just saw one of the drivers here in the, I think that was the Clavati car, go for big hops over some of the bumps at the apex of, I think that was turn 3, and almost went out into the wall because of it. You can see how much that car is oscillating over the bumps just when you ride along board with it. That's not something that you typically have to account for on a typical circuit when you're racing at tracks like Monza or Silverstone, places like that that are much smoother. So I think these drivers have probably also had to flex their setup muscles just a little bit more than usual to try to make the car a little more compliant while not slowing it down too much.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the setups because as it has been all season, this is an open setup series, and Formula One cars are some of the most complicated cars in the iRacing service to set up properly. There's so many things you can adjust, so many different knobs you can turn to make the car rotate more or push more in an area that you want it to push, or get power down in a better way. Clutch plates, something you got to worry about as well. So there's lots of different things you can do, and these cars get scienced out, and I think that's what helps Danilo and Marco Sanfilippo. But right now, Marco is buried in 4th in qualifying. I don't think that's where he's going to end up at the end. I think he'll jump up the order. But right now, Corey Whiting jumps up within a full second of Sanfilippo, Danilo. But Danilo, again, crushing right now, a 106.471 in that number 27 car.
With 16 minutes to go, there's definitely plenty of opportunity for shuffling, but I was also looking down the times on the side. Look at 4th and 5th, Sanfilippo and Coteau tied right now for 4th and 5th, down to the 1,000th of a second. So I think while we may have a big gap at the top right now with Sanfilippo and Whiting separated out by about a full second, then you got Whiting, Sandwith, Sanfilippo, and Coteau. Throw Grabowski and Bass in there, and all those cars are covered by about a second and a half. So that race for second might be really tight if it turns out to be kind of indicative of pace right now.
And you're going to see all the concrete walls that we're going to drive right out to the edge of. Street courses in general, pretty hazardous places to drive. There's not really a lot of runoff in most of these corners, and the walls that exist are basically all concrete tops. So you want to get right out to them to use all the racetrack, but you don't get the benefit of having a lot of runoff room or anything soft to hit. If you even nick a wall with these tires, you're going to bend your suspension components, and it'll probably be day over for you.
Well, that's what I mean. It's one of those tracks where you kind of race the track every bit as much as you race the drivers around you. So even if you end up by yourself and you're kind of on, a hot lapping qualifying session, it's so high risk, high reward at a track like this because there is no margin for error. As now you called it, Sanfilippo in the 13 hops up to second place with a 107.0. So now it is the team Sanfilippo drivers at the top, and then Sandwith bump back to 3rd.
I have to laugh a little bit. The camera we were just looking at, Finian DeCuna still does our camera sets. He called that camera the Wall of Death. So good to
man.
know that that's comforting. And we also got curb cam down there at the end of the long back straightaway. We're going to do a quick restart to the timing and scoring here as the qualifying session continues. Danilo Sanfilippo and Marco Sanfilippo continue to run at the top of the order. But again, Formula One racing in general is always known as being sort of single file just because of the speeds that you're carrying and the downforce levels that you have to fight with. But at street courses, it's not something we've seen in the U.S. in several decades. And I think with a small field, the chance that you're going to make a mistake based on everyone else's mistakes probably pretty reduced. So I think you're going to get a chance to just race the racetrack, find a groove. And I think you're going to see some racing this afternoon, especially up towards the front.
Taking a look at the corner at the end of the back straight, I believe that curb normally something you can pound off of in a GT car or a full-bodied car, but these cars are staying fully off of it, still picking up air over to the front tires at the apex there. But I totally agree. In Formula One, you tend to be a little more single file, even on a road course with some margin for error. Comparing it to real life, this track would be the closest to something like Monaco, where you absolutely have no room for error. Most other street circuits, even Baku and places like that, have built-in runoff in certain key areas. This track doesn't quite have that. It's not necessarily designed for Formula One cars, so this is kind of a mix of a high-speed, fast GT street circuit and the high-risk, high-reward of Monaco and a Formula One car matched together, which makes it that much more intense.
The two teammates at the top of the board, they remain there for now. Danilo and Marco Sanfilippo, 96 thousandths of a second separating them, then 7.5 tenths of a second back to find Cody Sandwith, who is teammate-less today. Typically, he'd have Luca Furlick with him on that Team Furlick race team. Through turn number one, another car goes sweeping through the shot. Steven Grabowski is also working teammate list this afternoon. The number 48 car across the line. Will he improve this time? A 108.168. Yes, it is an improvement. He will not jump up any positions, however. Look at the speeds they're carrying. 140 through that turn one, turn two complex.
And that's not an insignificant corner through there at turn one and turn two. And you have to set up a little bit further through turn one and into turn two. Now we hop on board. That's how unforgiving the curbs can get. That's turn three, and then another right-hander into turn four, where we're coming into one of the slowest sections of the track. You got to get the car shut down. It's a little over 90 degrees here. A really short alleyway up onto the back straightaway where you get a little bit of that breather, but this straight isn't really all that straight. You see it kind of bends to the right and then starts to bend back to the left into a really blind braking zone into that curb we were watching, missing the curb just a little bit into another narrow section of the track. And this is really momentum driven through here. You got to keep the speed up, but it's so narrow, it's kind of a little scary to into that slowest corner where the wall of death is going to be on your left. Coming off this corner, there's the wall of death, keeps it off of it this time through. And then into the final two corners, which are going to be a super high speed in these cars, probably over 100 miles an hour through both, flat out across the last one and onto the front straight again. Yeah,
that penultimate corner, that right-hander that tracks out, that is probably the most terrifying wall for me because you kind of have to pinch off the car. It wants to track out another 5 or 6 feet, and you have to basically tell the car to stop doing that or else you're going to pancake the wall driver's side first in a GT car. In a Formula car, you've got you're more central in terms of where you're mounted in the chassis, but you have to worry about getting those tires and suspension banged up against that concrete. There's Flavio Clavati across and working his way through, currently 9th in qualifying. Danilo Sanfilippo goes quicker, a 106.239, jumps him up 3.5 tenths in front of his teammate.
Still really tight between Sandwith, Coteau, and Whiting. Less than 2/10 of a second now. Less than 1/10 of a second even, separating those three for 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And then Grabowski and Bass.
There you go, like the fish.
I had to buffer for a second, sorry. Bass a little further back now. Those cars had been covered by a little more of a blanket. Now they're separated and pairing off just a bit with the 13 of Sanfilippo improving up to second a couple of laps ago.
Corey Whiting and Carlos Couteau, two of the White Coat F1 teammates, tracking out that there's a lot of tire bundles out there at the exit of that second or third corner. And those are pretty terrifying because if you track out and you miss your corner apex and you track out just a little bit too far, you can catch that with the left rear of the car and then turn it straight into the concrete. So just like most of the corners here, it is a threat if you mess it up just a little bit. Whiting on another fast lap here as he sweeps down towards the end of the back straightaway. 180 miles an hour into the braking zone, up over the top of the curb. And then into this very tight stadium section, as Finino always called it, as the big tall curbs on the left side of the racetrack to keep your tires off of. We'll talk about curbing a lot tonight. Keep off of it for the most part here at Detroit. Tracking onto the front straightaway again for Corey Whiting. We'll see if he can improve his best time previously at 107.432. No improvement there. He will stay 5th. 9.5 minutes remain in qualifying. Jason Seaman still the only driver to not have a time recorded on the board. And working through the back side of the racetrack now. Ooh, car spun around. I think that might have been Carlos Couteau who was turned around. Seaman's now working again towards this wall that I mentioned right here. We're going to turn in and real tight. You got to pinch off. And you want to accelerate when you get to the corner apex and drive up off, but you sort of have to wait till the car's settled on corner exit before you can jump back on the throttle.
And it's one of the bumpier sections overall. The track is bumpy in general, but that's one of the bumpier corners. You're completely right. It's a very easy corner to overdrive. There's another critical spot, that crest at the apex of turn, or the exit, I should say, of turn 2 is one that can really catch you off. If you're getting on throttle and trying to get down this longer straightaway, that's the second longest straightaway on the track. You can kind of catch that crest at the very last second, and it puts you out wider than you expect to. This is that very narrow section coming onto the most critical straightaway of this track. Runs a little bit wide, does Jason Seamans, and see how late on throttle that makes him. Coming down this longest back straightaway, going to crest close to 200 miles an hour by the time they hit the brakes.
On the brakes again, aim for the apex, take just a little bit off of it to avoid the curbing under the Auto Trader bridge. And this section is so, you want to get the throttle down here, Tom, but it's so bumpy that the rear tires don't want to hook up very well. And then it's getting late on throttle here and right back out to it. You can hear the tires spin up on exit, just trying to keep that 850 horsepower up underneath you, tight, going to get into the fence.
That's just how easy it is to overshoot that second to last corner. And I think this track, more than most, will test the lack of driver aids available on this generation F1 car, because this is, next to Monaco, I think probably one of the slower circuits that an F1 car would see. Obviously, they wouldn't see it in real life, so I think this is kind of a unique challenge.
7.5 minutes remaining here in qualifying. Danilo and Marco Sanfilippo. Danilo's still out there running laps. I think Marco has, for now, decided to take a break. Cody Sandwith remains 3rd. Carlos Couteau, who we're looking at now, 4th. Corey Whiting, his teammate, in 5th, and Stephen Grabowski, Charlie Bass, Steverson Oliveira, Flavio Clavati, Patrick Woodstrup, and Don Day. Jason Seamans has backed out. He'll try to run a quicker lap before the end of the session. Let's have a look at our weather information here, something we haven't poked at today. Relatively nice conditions, a really low humidity. Got sand falling out of the sky. It's 4.9% humidity. Oh, there's a big wreck for Couteau. 71 in the air, 74 on the racetrack. It's not going to be too hot or unmanageable, I think, in that regard. So weather is quite pleasant. I think what we're going to do is we're going to take a very short break. We'll be back in a few moments for the start of our Formula One Grand Prix here at Detroit Belle Isle. Welcome back to Sim TV. Just sorting out a couple timing issues over here on this end. Danilo Sanfilippo, Marco Sanfilippo still the fastest in qualifying as we are down to the final 5 minutes of this first qualifying session of the day before a 25-minute sprint race. Tom, typically we race for about an hour. Today, 2 25-minute races with a small field and a sprint race. Do you think that's going to increase drivers' what's what I'm looking for? They were going to take more risks, I think, today. Given the small field size and the sprint races, you think that's a concern maybe for those at the front of the field, knowing that drivers behind them get a second chance to beat them today?
Well, it's certainly potential, and I think also because of the nature of this track, the maneuvers have to be a little higher risk for that higher reward. So we're looking at one of the best passing opportunities there, down off of turn 2 into turn 3, and then another great passing opportunity here down that wide back straightaway, but it's not necessarily very straight in nature. So in general, the passing opportunities here are low, which makes the creativity that you have to use, we'll call it, a little bit more, maybe a little more gusto as well. Unfortunately, with the open wheel cars, F1 cars, can't push and shove very much, but I think with the opportunity for the reset in race number 2, mixed with cooler conditions, a shorter race, I think it'll be a little bit more frantic in nature, just in approach anyway, than a typical 1 hour race that we'd see.
Corey Whiting across the line on a fast lap now, heading through the first couple sectors. We'll pull up the sector times now as he rockets down the straightaway towards turn number 3. In the braking zone, this curb is a right angle curb. Stay off of that one under the Lear Corporation Bridge. Then sweeping through, keeping the speed, and then into the hard left-right braking zones here. Watch the concrete on the right, and then get that right front tire right on that Pure Michigan sign. And then now down the straightaway again, 22.080 first sector, and heading towards the heaviest braking zone on the circuit. Poking into backside under the tree tunnel on the backside of the track. 2.5 minutes left in qualifying before we get on to our 25-minute race. And Danilo Sanfilippo, Marco Sanfilippo, as normal, considering it's 2020. That's the most normal thing I've seen all year. The top two, the Sanfilippo brothers.
Looks like a little further down the field in 6th and 7th, Charlie Bass and Steven Grabowski both improving. So Bass is now within 4 tenths of Carlos Coteau, and Steven Grabowski's not far behind. So that gap that had started to form on pace between 3rd, 4th, 5th, and then 6th and 7th is compressing once again. We might have a really good race for that final podium position.
A couple more laps left in qualifying here. Charlie Bass through that first couple corners and accelerating out. You see the transition, the pavement changes there from asphalt to concrete, then back to asphalt. You've driven at a couple tracks, including Sebring. You actually won at Sebring, where the pavement transitions. And in the real world, that's a pretty abrupt change in terms of the feel and the grip level.
Yeah, it really is. And concrete tends to have a much more fine aggregate to it. It's something that the tires can grip onto, grab onto, and that abrasiveness gives it its grip, whereas asphalt tends to be a much more smooth, a little more chunky in the aggregate in the rock that they use, which makes it a little more polished, especially with time, and that takes the grip away. So the fact that the concrete stays grabby and the asphalt gets slippery, especially with heat as well, is something that the asphalt doesn't tend to handle very well. That is simulated well here, and you kind of do have to account for those changes. It's one of those things where, a normal driving line, quick tag of the wall there for, I think, the 94, that change in grip and in surface is something that you have to account for when you're approaching a corner, when you're getting on throttle through a corner. That specific spot on this track at Belle Isle, if you've ever seen on the internet anywhere a Corvette ZR1 pace car spinning and crashing on its outlap at an IndyCar race, that was in that section, and that's partially due to the crest there, partially due to that change in surface.
Qualifying is almost complete. Jason Siemens trying to get one more lap in here, currently 11th. This will be a disappointing effort for the Siemens Privateer team right now, 10th and 11th in qualifying, a full 3 seconds off of the pole sitter. So that just goes to show you the difference between the top and the bottom here is quite large today. This is a very tricky racetrack to extract speed out of. You go to a larger place where you can carry more momentum, and I think that favors drivers that are down the ticket just a little bit. Tracks that are more require more finesse, like street circuits, I think you'll see bigger gaps just because of the challenge that it is to. What is my language today? I can't talk this morning, Tom. I'm struggling as we have qualifying almost complete, about a minute left. Some days are good, some days are not, with the whole talking thing. You know?
That's true. Well, you did time travel recently.
That's true.
Change time zones. Maybe it's that.
It could be.
No, but I couldn't agree more with that sentiment about the street circuits being. You have to be a little more both creative and gutsy to put the lap together, and the time just kind of hemorrhages if you don't have that confidence to put the car where it needs to go. If you don't have the ability to kind of see where the car is going to end up, adapt to where it's going to end up, put the car straight out to the wall without risking touching the wall. That will certainly pull drivers apart more than a track that's more fast and flowing and a little more standard. I also think that this track is probably not something that most of these drivers would have had any reason to see much before, whereas a track that's a little more common and maybe more platforms, some of the more typical circuits that you'd see on the F1 calendar or any sports car calendar really, those tracks tend to be a little more well-known, and then just it's a little easier to visualize where you need to be and where to put the car.
We'll roll through our starting lineup here. Danilo Sanfilippo on the front row in the number 27, and Marco Sanfilippo, his teammate, starts in second on the outside of that front row.
On the second row, it's the 32 of Cody Sandwith, and then Corey Whiting, the first of his teammates, starts fourth in the number 12 car.
In row number 3, Carlos Couteau in the number 22. Charlie Bass rolls off in sixth in the TNT Racing number 94.
And then the 48 of Steven Grabowski starts alongside Esteverson Oliveira in the 30 car in eighth.
In ninth place, Flavio Clavati in the number 71. Patrick Woodstrup, the Siemens privateer driver, rolls off in the number 3 car in 10th.
And in the final row, 11th and 12th, Jason Siemens in the 15 will start 11th, and Don Day in the number 4 brings up the back of the field.
Jason Siemens is the last driver yet to grid here. We're going to have a 25-minute race. That's about a 23-lap event here at Detroit Belle Isle. Welcome again to SimTV. If you just joined us, my name's Kyle Heyer, joined this afternoon by Tom O'Gorman, 4-time IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge winner. Going to be here a lot more on SimTV in the next coming months and hopefully years, depending on how long this little experiment lasts. It's gone pretty well so far. Jason Siemens grids up. 25 minutes of racing from Detroit Belle Isle about to get underway. Here we go. The lights are red. Now they're green. Green flag flies, and we're racing at Detroit. Danilo and Marco drag racing down to turn number 1. Danilo leads the way. Behind him, Corey Whiting and Sandwith side by side through one. Sandwith all the way to the wall as the teammates behind him scatter. It's Carlos Couteau out the inside of the white coat F1 car, 3 wide. Sandwith in the middle of the racetrack as they head down to corner number 3. And car, I think that's Steverson Oliveira or Flavio Clavati in the background. They have found themselves all the way packed up against the fence. They've made it through so far.
And Couteau had started to show his nose there. The car we're looking at in the middle of the camera was showing the nose to make it 3 wide up the inside for turn 3 and had to back out of it. Lost a couple more positions. So I think Steven Grabowski is now up a little further. And Charlie Bass has dropped behind Couteau as well. But that makes so Sanfilippo is up at the front, Sandwith and Whiting, and then Grabowski with a great start up from 7th to 5th.
And Danilo leads by half a second. Now behind them, Grabowski, Bass, Oliveira, Flavio Clavati, and Jason Siemens, all having a pretty good scrap. Single filed out now, and the passing is going to be, I think the challenge today is going to be getting a run and where you make those passes. We already talked about the passing zones here at Detroit, but I don't think it's quite that simple.
Well, and another thing we didn't really talk about much is the aero wash off of the back of these F1 cars makes driving on the street circuit even more challenging because you have to account for the push that you might get in the aero wash when you're following another car closely. And when that happens, obviously you can get put into a concrete wall a heck of a lot faster. Instead of running over a curb, maybe going into the grass a little bit, you're into a wall. So the aero wash is going to have to be something these drivers have to keep an eye on, as we saw Carlos Couteau start to get a little racy on the back of the 48 of Steven Grabowski. But up at the front, look at the Sanfilippos, Danilo and Marco in formation onto the back straightaway on lap 2 have cleared this field by a significant margin, almost 2 seconds.
And now down the back straightaway, and that's kind of been par for the course this season. Corey Whiting and Steven Grabowski, they're going at it for 4th place in the background. There they are. And Grabowski getting up to the rear tailpipes of that number 12 car and chasing each other to the tighter parts of this racetrack. And getting power down on corner exit is going to be the biggest issue, I think. You see Grabowski miss the turn in, big understeer.
And that's that wall of death we were talking about. That's the slowest corner on the track, and it's really tough to get set up because it's a decreasing corner down to the apex. Looks like he might have even tagged the wall on the exit of one of those final corners, but Grabowski drops off the back a little bit. Carlos Couteau has completely disappeared off of his mirrors, so they're a little bit spread out now across the top 5. and it looks like Coteau's actually lost another position to Bass.
And Coteau's gone down a couple spots. I think we saw him have a big moment coming out of the wall of death corner. Flavio Clavati, Jason Siemens, 9th and 10th. And Siemens and Woodstrup, we mentioned their struggles in qualifying. So far, they have not been able to go pretty much anywhere in the race. Closest battle right now is between Whiting and Grabowski, still 0.7 of a second separating them. A bit more of a battle going on behind Bass here for 6th.
I think that these gaps that we're seeing might be about the closest the drivers can run to each other without getting that aero interference. I don't have much experience in this car to say whether it's similar to real life, more or worse in the iRacing service, but I think every time we've seen somebody get close to the back bumper or the back wing of the car in front, they've made a mistake and it's dropped them back, and I think that's due to a little bit of that wash.
So again, the strategy component really doesn't exist here today. You're going to run the entire race without making a pit stop, so this turns this essentially into a 25-minute sprint race. So there's no undercut, overcut, none of that to worry about today, just who can go the fastest. And right now, Danilo is the fastest driver on the racetrack. Check that. Marco, quicker that time by a couple hundredths of a second.
And look at the gap they've built, almost 5 seconds back to Sandwith in 3rd. There, Sandwith finally appears in the back of our camera shot, and he's got a pretty good buffer back to Whiting. So now these guys are back in qualifying mode. You said it's a sprint race. It's basically a hot lap qualifying. Who can run the fastest without making a mistake, as we see Don Day making that mistake and goes for a spin.
He's gone for a ride. Let's have a look, and just got up on top of the curb, Tom, and just slowly looped the car. But the suspension is so stiff on these, as soon as you clip a curb, your car is just going to turn into hippity-hoppity curbs in my property and go for a loop.
The track is bumpy enough. The curbs are kind of a death sentence if you touch them just the wrong way. This battle between Bass and Coteau is not going anywhere. Remember, Coteau qualified 5th. He's dropped all the way down to 7th. So he has more pace in that car than we've seen, but Sandwith, Whiting, Grabowski, Bass, and Coteau were all within about the same second of each other on the qualifying grid. So as drivers are able to learn off of each other and find a little more pace, perhaps Grabowski and Bass have found something that Coteau didn't quite have.
Jason Siemens trying to reel in Flavio Clavati in the number 71 right now. Clavati just up the road in the F1 APS Silver Team car. They're running, actually, nose to tail in order right now. 8th and 9th for Oliveira. 9th is the Clavati car. And look at the teammates all grouped together, with the exception of Whiting and Coteau and White Coat F1. The Sanfilippo's leading. Then the White Coat F1 drivers are separated by Grabowski and Bass, but then Oliveira, Clavati, and Siemens and Woodstrup all right alongside their teammate.
Well, I was personally kind of fascinated by that, especially in qualifying. He was even more perfectly paired off, and for these drivers to be all driving the same car, there's not that multi-manufacturer aspect going on, but that to me tells me how important the setups are. And you have to assume, well, Carlos Coteau catches the inside wall coming onto the back straightaway. I think he might have got away with one. Doesn't look like any damage to the front of that car, but that was close. What I was going to say is it was fascinating to me to see the teammates paired off still, just like you would see in real Formula One, where the teammates tend to be pretty close to each other on the grid. That tells me that the setup is so critical in these cars.
Yeah, just nipped the wall there a little bit. These front wings are pretty fragile, but he might have gotten away with it. I think he got it with the rubber on the tire, and it just kind of bounced off rather than hitting the wing. So that was a little bit of luck involved there. Clavati and Siemens, they are separated by 0.3 of a second, about 2 car lengths as they head down the back straightaway.
Up to 6.3 seconds back from the leader to 3rd. The Sanfilippo still running in formation, but Siemens is looking racy on the back of Clavati. He's gotten a little bit closer every single time. He's within that striking distance. Look at the speed he carries into turn 1. Is he going to be able to get on the throttle onto the front, onto that second straightaway? No, loses some of the distance as he crests that hill down towards turn 3.
I was noticing a few laps ago that a lot of drivers are actually staying far right when they come up to that big concrete patch. There's a big bump over there. I wonder if they're staying off to the side to miss that bump before they move back left for the next corner.
Yeah, that is something.
Whoa, trouble! Clavati, big impact to the wall. That's going to be major damage on that car. Just the slightest of mistakes, it'll cost him probably a solid finish. Just understeer straight into it, then he's going to catch that wall opening. That'll be fairly severe damage for the 71.
Yeah, that turn 4 is not a slow corner. You got to be gutsy going in there, and you got a big push at the apex to put him out into the wall. That's the first time we've seen a big mistake push someone into the concrete, but I guarantee you it will not be the last. We have 18 minutes to go in race 1 and another 25-minute race coming up in this Formula I race today.
Corey Whiting, big slip there towards the wall of death, but he managed to hang on. Running 4th in front of Stephen Grabowski. Grabowski about a 10th slower. Up at the front of the field, Danilo Sanfilippo has found another gear. He gained 0.3 on his teammate last time by. Now the lead difference is 1.8 seconds, and then 6 full seconds back to 3rd place, Cody Sandwith.
Looks like, to me, it's just watching the 27 of Danilo Sanfilippo in the lead is he's just got the consistency figured out. He's not necessarily been faster on every single lap, although last time through he definitely was. A couple of laps ago, Marco was the faster of the two, but it seems to be that this 27 car that we ride on board with has the consistency, and he's just clicking off, like I said, those qualifying level laps. Here's that decreasing radius into the tightest corner on the track. Still not down to first gear quite, but then really patient on the throttle up through the gears towards those last couple corners.
And so smooth in both Danilo and Marco. It depends on what track we're at. Each week they basically trade who's faster. And this week it seems like Danilo has a little bit of the upper hand, but we've also seen Danilo lead much of the race and then also have problems and make a mistake later in the day. It's rare, but when it happens, Marco's usually there to take advantage of it. I think back to the first race of the season, Danilo and Marco both running inside the top 5 and actually leading most of the race, and both had issues in the closing moments, and that led to the American Ben Fuller taking home the victory at the National Park of Speed. So still not impossible that things could go south, so they got to be vigilant here in the next 16 minutes to make sure that doesn't happen. Seaver Grabowski has just had problems in the 44, or 48, excuse me, some damage to that car.
He had been on such a strong run. Take a look at it. It looks like it was in the turn 1-2 sequence and maybe cresting at turn 2. Catches some curb in the middle of turn 1, starts to bounce, and then straight over that crest. Yep, exactly like the Corvette pace car did at the Indy race a couple of years back. Gets a rear end away from him.
More trouble.
Back into the wall again and calls it a day.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. That's, again, a challenging racetrack because, wow, look at that. Marco, that was a big moment coming into the wall of death. This racetrack is so challenging, not just because of the walls, but because of the vertical undulations and how rough this racetrack is. It's hard enough on sports cars, let alone very stiffly sprung Formula One cars.
As we've been watching these leaders, Danilo in the front, Marco in second place, the teammates. Danilo is actually using less of the track than Marco is. Marco looks like he's on the absolute ragged edge. We've seen him almost out to the concrete wall a couple of times. He was almost in the grass exiting this corner, turn 3 last lap through, catches the curb and goes straight out to the grass again. So Marco is, I think, of the two, trying harder, but he's trying harder because he doesn't seem to quite have the pace. That said, he has closed the gap a little bit to Danilo at the front. Which comes back to that consistency thing. If Marco is pushing harder, maybe he has more pace in the car, but he's being less consistent, I still think Danilo is in good control of this race.
I think so too, and well, I will say that Marco did run 0.2 faster last time by, but it's kind of a give and take sort of thing. I think Danilo is faster overall. He's been trending forward. But it does look like Marco has the pace if he can set his mind to it. I just don't think the consistency is there. He's really struggling coming out of that corner and digging without spinning out those rear tires and having a trouble getting the car back under speed.
He's close up another 0.2 this lap. It was 1.5 at the line, and on the left side of your screen you can see it's 1.3 coming across start finish this time again. So Marco taking big risks. Right now it's paying off, but he's got to be so careful because we've seen how fast it goes wrong here at Belle Isle.
And waiting to transition over the road surf. You see how he's staying to the right now. He's going to cross over into the brakes for turn number 3. Just missed that apex curb, track out all the way to the grass again. Last time by was only a 10th quicker than Danilo, but still trending the right direction. 14 minutes to go. Did Danilo burn up his stuff out front?
Yeah, I'm not versed well enough to say how quickly the tires tend to fall off, but this has been a new format for the drivers this week that if you're used to a 1-hour race, 25 minutes, you can get excited and burn the car down really fast if you're not paying attention. I'd be surprised if they were able to do that in just 10 minutes. We're still less than halfway through this one. But check out this off of the back straightaway.
I wanted to watch the moment, watch the tires as he gets on this here. Just slams over that curb, and that's a pretty rough transition to make. And I think that the fear that I have is when you bounce any of the front tires, it's also going to pick up the rears as well. And if you're bouncing the entire way under the acceleration zone, you can spin the car out pretty easily. So Marco's still digging. That time through was a 10th slower, so back trending for the 27 again.
Yeah, it's just that easy to make that small mistake and lose the amount of time that you've gained. It's been really cool to ride on board with the leaders, Danilo and Marco, and watch the body language of the cars versus maybe Clavati or Oliveira down towards the bottom. Those teammates, you can just see the compliance in the onboard camera that the Sanfilippo cars have. I'm assuming they're using very similar setups, and they seem to just be way more compliant over the bumps. They're much more planted, and they're not oscillating around nearly as much as some of the cars further down in the field that have absolutely struggled with some of those bumps. And you can just watch those cars, especially in qualifying, kind of floating almost when they catch those bumps.
Looking a little bit deeper in the field as that lead battle has sort of fizzled for now. Corey Whiting continues to run inside the top 5. This is a driver that we've seen really increase his performance over the course of the season. Really didn't have a lot of luck until lately. The field sizes have shrunk. I think that's allowed him to focus on driving the car and not battling competitors and maybe getting himself into bad situations. So he's really taken advantage of the smaller fields and learned how to race the racetrack, and that's, in this series, has been what has given drivers a lot of success.
He's put a pretty good gap on Whiting. We were riding with Whiting. Put a pretty good gap back to Bass. Those two had been close together. He's lost touch a little bit with Sandwith, who's a very lonely third up the road a bit, but Bass is keeping the pressure on. He's within striking distance if Whiting in the 12th car makes any amount of mistake.
Love the helmet on the 94 as well as he heads under the bridge on the back straightaway and heads down towards the heavy braking zone. Last time by was a full second quicker than Corey Whiting, though, so I don't think this is completely over yet. Carlos Couteau a little bit farther behind. He was basically on pace with Bass last time through. From Oliveira on back, they're all in the 110s or slower. So I think the top 6 all still have the chance of kind of accordiating back together, really first and second, and then third through 6th might end up in another battle before this 11.5 minutes is over.
Very possible. I think Sandwith is pretty comfortable in third as he's got 6 seconds advantage to Whiting. Just how fast these cars are through this section. Top back, this is riding on with Sandwith, and he's a very lonely third, as we mentioned. It's not even a straightaways back to Whiting. It's a straightaway or more.
And again, missing Luca Furlick this week, which is a real shame because Luca is another driver that I put in the same bucket as Corey Whiting, who didn't have a ton of success at the beginning of the season, but has found a lot of pace lately. And there are some drivers in the field, like Ben Fuller, who won a couple races early in the season and hasn't been around since. So that's opened up a lot of opportunities for drivers that hadn't been running up front to run up inside the top 5 and maybe score some podiums.
Sandwith looks really clean right now. It looks like he's very comfortable with where the pace of the car is. He's not necessarily doesn't look as visually as fast as the Sanfilippo's, but I think that might be down to setup because he looks like he's just very comfortable and confident in putting the car where he needs it to be. The car looks compliant, maybe a little bit tight, but I think that confidence that he's got in the car right now is one of the things that's allowed him to start to pull away, is he had qualified not too far off of the pace of the rest of the cars behind him, but he's been able to build that gap up to 6+ seconds, having started in third and just continues to cruise there.
Yeah, again, you can watch his hands. He's so smooth driving this car. I think that's a real feel thing in the Formula One Williams, that you need to be comfortable, because if you're hacksawing at the wheel, this car does exactly what you tell it to do. So if you're hacksawing at the wheel, you're going to be sliding those front tires. Being smooth is how you're fast in this car, and Sandwith looks very smooth. I think it just needs a little bit more help getting grip in the front end.
Back a little further, Bass and Couteau are still absolutely tight to one another. 1.7 seconds at the line last time through, but Couteau had worked it a little closer. Looks like Couteau actually might have made a mistake coming onto this lap, as he had been about 1.5 seconds, now is over 2 seconds off the back. Yeah, it looks like Couteau's lost some gap on this lap, and he's been one of the drivers that has had the pace but less consistency at Belle Isle, which is a high-risk place to not have the consistency, because if you just put that one tire wrong, you're into a wall.
I can't remember what driver was it that I think, was it Senna? There was a driver that they were running at a street circuit, and they said that a wall had moved, and they checked the wall, and it had moved like 1/4 of an inch or something like that. I don't remember what driver that was.
Yeah, it was Senna.
It was Senna? Do you remember what track that was at?
I think it was one of those temporary weird street circuits like Detroit or Las Vegas or Houston, or some track in the 80s or 70s that was a little, like, it wasn't a common track. But yeah, he crashed his car, and they were blaming it on him, and he was insistent and absolutely adamant that the track had changed, and they went out and measured, and it had moved, I think, 4 millimeters.
I love that. It's so fascinating. But that just goes to show you I mean, obviously Senna would be an outlier in that, but I think it just goes to show you the level of precision that's required to be fast. I mean, you're getting down to inches every corner. I mean, a place like Watkins Glen or Indianapolis or Laguna Seca, as Couteau makes a big lockup into turn number 3. Big moment there, but as I was saying, you make a mistake at those racetracks, 1/4 of an inch isn't going to make a difference, but in a place like this, it will.
Couteau honestly might have caught the wall on the left side on the braking. Looks like he might have bumped and just ever so slightly touched it.
Right?
It was very close. If he didn't touch it, he was really, really close. We're talking millimeters, just like Senna, but was lucky to get away with that one. Just a fairly harmless lockup. Fortunately, he's lost almost now 5 seconds back to the rear wing of Bass. But back at the front, the Sanfilippo's, now look at Marco. He's got a couple of flyers and kicked on the afterburners. It was 1.8 seconds 2 laps ago. It's down to 1.3 right now.
Yeah, 1.3. He gained a half a second last time out. So he really is flying right now. I think he's making up a lot of that distance. Danilo might have burned off some of the tire. We haven't seen tire wear be an enormous factor. We're only running about a half second off, or Danilo was a half second off his best, but Marco just ran only 200ths off of his best time of the day. So Marco has been more consistent than Danilo over this longer run, but Danilo was certainly a lot faster at the beginning of it.
Well, this makes me excited for race 2 coming up. We're going to race for another 25 minutes, and this shows me, I think, if Marco can claim the lead or keep it a little closer at the beginning of the race, we might get an even better battle than this one. But I can't stress how intense this is in these cars right now, how fast they're going. Under just over a minute of lap time around Belle Isle is crazy fast, and how intense it is to stay as perfect as these drivers have for this long of the race, and still 6.5 minutes to go.
I love watching the second corner when you come over the crest. There's just a slight lift to set the car, then you're back on throttle and driving it over the crest. Then you cross over that center line, and then deep into the brakes again, down to second gear. Nice line there. Marco that time was still a 10th quicker. 1.2 is the gap now as we get to the final 6.5 minutes.
He's on full send mode right now. He's absolutely on the limit. Coming onto this back straightaway, right up to the wall and out to the outside. Lost a little bit of time in the first sector of this lap, but Marco is not quitting, not giving up on this one.
Certainly not. And behind them, Corey Whiting and Charlie Bass continue to run at less than a second apart, 8.5 tenths of a second. Was the gap just a moment ago. Now it's up to 1, as I think Whiting's a little faster through this first sector, but Bass can see it. The carrot is dangling in front of him here. With 5 minutes to go, you're going to pull out all the stops. You don't have to make these tires last any longer. 5 more minutes, burn them all up, use them all up. Curious about your experience on slick racing tires. I mean, you race on Michelin's in the TCR, Honda Civic Type R TCR. You got towards the end of the race. I mean, were there races where you were completely driving over the limit and sliding the front end, or is it always about being the smoothest? Oh, big trouble there for Charlie Bass.
That was a mild hit, but it was potentially enough. The front wing is definitely damaged. We'll see when he gets into one of the more significant corners whether this car is still handling okay. But visible damage is usually a bad sign on one of these Formula One Williams. He didn't lose a ton of time. He might have dodged a bullet with that big time. I suspect he won't be quite as fast as he was, but he might have enough fuel left in the tank with 4.5 minutes to go. With that buffer that he's got back to Coteau in the 22, I think Charlie Bass is a lucky boy today.
Yeah, I think Corey Whiting will no longer have to deal with Charlie Bass on his tailpipes. Carlos Coteau could see, I mean, I think he's too far back to know that Bass has hit the wall, but that's like smelling blood in the water. You see your competitor in front get into the fence. That shows weakness, and Bass will have to make that car last. It will definitely be slower. He's already lost a couple seconds to Whiting, but he might be safe with only 4 laps to go next time by.
It looks like his pace back to Coteau is okay, so Carlos Coteau may not have the opportunity that he would if he did know that Bass touched the wall. If he's gotten hopeful for it, that hope might not be there. Yeah, actually Bass is continuing to start to pull away from Coteau once again, so it looks like the 94 is okay. Dropped off the back of the number 12 car with that one, so that probably locked up the battle for 4th, 5th, and 6th. At least 4th and 5th. But man, that was close.
3.5 minutes left to go. Marco must have made a big mistake just a moment ago because he's lost a bunch of ground. 3.4 seconds back, now 3.5. What mistake did he make that put him in that position? I think we're going to have to go back a little farther to find exactly what happened. But I think we'll see him make a mistake here, maybe? Understeered a little bit, but I don't know where he lost 2 seconds, Tom, but he's back to 3.6, and Danilo looking a lot better off now, 3.6 out front.
Yeah, it can take a little bit of a breather, but at this point in the race, you almost want to keep your momentum up. Lap traffic's going to come into this one as I think they're now catching Woodstrup at the back of the pack, Patrick Woodstrup there. But what I was going to say is at this point, it's almost better to just keep your momentum up and keep doing what you've been doing, because if you try to back off a little bit, that's asking for making a mistake. And you think if you're trying to go slower on purpose, it should be easier to not make a mistake. But if you've been doing the same thing for 23 minutes straight, and then for the last 2 minutes of the race you try to do something different, it's really easy to make a small mistake. So I think the 27 car, Danilo Sanfilippo, needs to just keep cranking out these laps.
And they're going to click off very quickly. Danilo now working through some lap traffic. Again, it's Jason Siemens. He probably won't put up much of a fight. Blue flags are not optional in this series. Once the blue flag is displayed, you have to pull over and let the leader on by, and that's what Woodstrup will do. So Danilo will go on by. And that makes your life a lot easier as a race leader, Tom. I'm sure there's drivers at the front of most racing series that would love for blue flags to be compulsory and not optional, but reality is not always the same, and someday you're going to be fighting for that lead lap spot, and you're going to want to be able to stay out front and battle the leader, but not here today.
Yeah, certainly, especially at a track like Belle Isle, where you have to take a risk anytime you go side by side. Good to see that rule is in effect here this week especially. But coming on to what I suspect will be the white flag next time by, we're on the penultimate lap of race 1 here for the Formula I Racing Series. And
it might not be. I think we might get 2 to go next time by, just because of how fast these laps tick off. We'll see. It's going to be pretty close, I think. But Charlie Bass, Carlos Couteau, 0.8 of a second. Now Couteau's reeled him in. If this is 2 laps, it's great for Couteau. If it's 3, it's even better.
So Bass had recovered from that small contact with the wall in the second to last corner, but it looks like he's not been able to maintain the pace that he had been running, and that gap has gone very quickly. It looks like Couteau's going to be within drafting distance now, and we're going to have a race for 5th.
Certainly going to be a race for 5th here, and if we come back to the white flag, that's going to be good news for Bass. Couteau would love for it to be 2. It's all going to depend on where Sanfilippo comes across the line. Out of the 5th corner here, and now towards the back straightaway, turn number 6, 0.7 of a second. But Carlos, once he gets there, he has to figure out how to complete that pass. Meanwhile, Danilo out up front. He's already through. Now this is going to be the final lap. White flag in the air as he sweeps on through.
Build that lead up to 4.5 seconds now back to Marco Sanfilippo, his teammate. But look at this, the battle for 5th is on. Bass and Couteau are within a car length of each other. They're coming onto the white flag lap. What does Carlos Couteau have left in the tank? He qualified better than Charlie Bass, but made some mistakes early on, didn't have the pace or the confidence at the beginning of the race, but it's coming back to him, and he still has 5th. He smells blood in the water.
White flag in the air for the battle for 5th. Top 5 positions under attack. Bass has it. Couteau wants it. Some damage on the front wing. Couteau that time was about a full second quicker as they came across the line. He can do this if he can get the run.
Look at him hunting in the background, starting to show the nose in the mirrors, and he's being patient right now, not pushing the issue too much, but he's ever so slightly closing up to the back of the yellow number 94. They're going to be on this back straightaway. This is the easiest and most obvious passing zone left on the lap. He's got to get a good run right here. Nails the corner. Yes, gets the power down. He's within the draft. Watch this gap close.
Checkered flag for Danilo and Marco Sanfilippo. They will sweep the front 2 spots. Cody Sandwith will round out the podium. Here's coming Couteau up the inside. Big dive into turn number 6. He's over the top of the curb. They touch and he's through. What a pass.
Oh, that was really pushing the issue, but he had to do it. That was the last real opportunity that he had, and he pushed the issue, made it work. The 94 drops a position. There was light contact at the apex, but both drivers working together to get cleanly through there. And the wounded number 94 is going to lose that spot with a half a lap to go.
Wow, that is awful for Bass, but Couteau, he used up all the curbing, got 4 tires up over the top of it to try to make that pass complete. Couteau, top 5 here at Detroit Belle Isle. Bass will have to settle for 6th. Severson Oliveira and Jason Siemens will round out the rest of the field. I want to go back and look at that. I don't know about you, Tom. That was a lot of fun to watch.
When we're coming onto the back straightaway, I really wasn't sure that he would have enough draft to get there, but about halfway down the straightaway, the gap just started evaporating like water on hot pavement. Look at this gap start to go away, and he realized this is the last chance I've got. Pokes the nose late on the brakes, aims basically for the curbs, all 4 over into the air, a slight touch at the apex. He gathers it up. The car was bounding from that curb and was able to hold the spot. Wow.
That was a really amazing pass that he got done in the closing moments. Here is a look at your race results. Danilo Sanfilippo at the top of the order out of Italy in the Fratelli Capone Corsa car alongside his teammate in second, Marco Sanfilippo, then Cody Sandwith, Corey Whiting, and Carlos Couteau. And with Couteau's pass, he puts both White Coat F1 cars in the top 5. Excellent run there. Siemens and Woodstrup 8th and 9th, Stephen Grabowski 10th, and Dante Flavio Clavati are the last drivers on the grid. We're not done quite yet. We're going to do it all over again here in just a moment, so stay with us. We'll be back in a few moments for race number 2.
heart of Virginia, there's a stretch of pavement that has ingrained itself in American racing history. Built in 1957 with just a bulldozer and a plot of land, Virginia International Raceway has become an icon. Over the years since its reopening in 2000, it has hosted IMSA, the American Le Mans Series, NASCAR, SCCA, and Champ Car races. Legends have raced there, including Roger Penske, Mark Donohue, Richard Petty, Hurley Haywood, Dan Gurney, and more. Between turns 11 and 12 stood a defying feature, an old oak tree. This tree stood untouched, shading the south end of the course for decades. For some, oak tree became a symbol of VIR and a reminder of how road courses used to be built. They used to be built with the lay of the land, following each contour and moving around obstacles, not through them. Earth may have been moved, but not tarnished. Oak tree was a lasting memory of when tracks were not just built, they came to be, like the tree. Although oak tree no longer stands, nor does hog pen turn 17, the corners both still bear the name of what used to exist. And the track stays unchanged the way it was meant to be, with the lay of the land, for the land. Maybe that's why Paul Newman called it heaven on earth.
Welcome back live to Sim TV and the Formula I F1 World Championship. My name is Kyle Heyer, joined by Tom O'Gorman for our second of two 25-minute races this afternoon from Detroit, Belle Isle in Michigan. This is going to be a fun afternoon. We saw our first race with a great battle for the top 5 spot at the end. It was Carlos Couteau over Charlie Bass. Tom, we get to do it all over again. What did we learn from race 1 that might direct how race 2 looks?
Well, I think we learned consistency is key at a track like this. The mistakes compound a little quicker, and things happen really fast. We saw between the top two, Danilo and Marco Sanfilippo. Marco seemed to be the faster of the two for portions of the race, but Danilo was the more consistent and wound up taking the win. But I also think really anything could happen, starting with Corey Whiting, Steven Grabowski, Carlos Couteau, Charlie Bass. All 4 of those drivers were within striking distance of each other at certain times. Certain mistakes played into and certain charges played into how that battle worked itself out. But it looks like we have a new contender on the board. The 39 is a new name for me.
Owen Jolivet is running, we haven't seen him yet today. GTS RL Racing, I don't think he's got a teammate with him this afternoon, so Jolivet will be on his own for GTS RL Racing. And he's been pretty successful in the past, so it would be good to see him running up inside the top 5 as he sweeps through the first sector. And he could be disruptive inside the top 5, but we'll have to see how he goes. Right now, 3rd behind the Sanfilippo.
Yeah, big time. And the car he's looking most challenging to is Cody Sandwith, who had a very lonely and consistent 3rd place run in race number 1. There's a look at him. And look at them. They're almost tied in qualifying for race 2. So with 8 minutes to go, Sandwith might not have such a calm race number 2.
He might have someone to fight with. Jolivet in 3rd, Sandwith 4th, Whiting 5th, Charlie Bass in 6th, Couteau, Siemens, Grabowski, and Oliveira, the rest of your top 10. Don Day has put in a time, and he's pulled off to the side for now. Danilo and Marco separated by only a 1/10 of a second right now. It was Danilo that won the first race. I wonder if we'll see a flipping of this, as Marco seemed like he had found some pace towards the end of the race, but it's all about the run down to turn 1. I think if Marco can get out front, he might be able to lead the entire thing.
Yeah, I totally agree, and that was kind of the consistency thing we talked about. Marco was the faster but less consistent of the two, in my opinion. Danilo was just the epitome of consistency and was able to pull out the win, but that's an even closer gap than we saw in qualifying for race 1 between the two of them. I'm also looking a little bit down the order. Look at Whiting, Bass, Couteau, Siemens, and Grabowski covered by less than a second, and Siemens is looking strong this race. Jason Siemens was outside the top 10 in qualifying, I believe, last race, or just on that 10th position. Now he's up to 8th, and he's within the mix between Couteau and Grabowski.
One thing we didn't really talk about, we talked about wing damage and suspension damage, but one thing we didn't chat about was floor. And in these cars, the floor of the vehicle is so low to the ground that if you come off the curb and you bounce, you're not really bouncing off the tires and suspension. You're scraping the floor of the car, and it's such an important piece of the downforce component of these race cars that I would stay off the curbs, not for my tires, not for my suspension, but for the floor of the car, because that's a really critical part of the machine and how you go fast around here. So something that I was just watching these cars bounce and kind of scrape the bottoms of the car against the concrete. That's not something I think you should be doing over the course of the race.
Sure. Another driver who's going to be looking for some redemption is Steven Grabowski. He had issues kind of midway through that race and ended up tagging a wall once and then stuffing it into another wall a couple corners later. He DNF'd that race and finished 7 laps down. But that 48 car sits 9th. He had been on a really good charge. Also a shout out to the 94 of Charlie Bass. He touched the wall with maybe 3 or 4 laps to go and ended up succumbing to the pressure from Carlos Couteau. But now it looks like Bass is a little quicker in qualifying this time through, and that's what you mentioned, is if you just tag that wall a little bit, the damage takes seconds off of your lap times here.
So qualifying, about 6.5 minutes remaining. Jolivet and Sandwith, 37 thousandths between them. Jolivet appearing only for the 2nd race of the day. And I believe how this works, I think they take your best finish. I don't think it's an average, I think, or both. I think it's just they take the best finish of the day. So for Owen Jolivet only appearing for 1 race sort of makes sense. You might as well just show up in 1. You just don't get the opportunity to make it up in the other. So if he has a good run today, this is going to be really worth his time. If he doesn't have a good run, maybe he should have run both just to kind of get a banker in.
Well, it's certainly exciting to have somebody come in and maybe upset the apple cart just a little bit, especially if it introduces a battle for 3rd that was not there last time through. We had pretty good battles between the Sanfilippos at the front, and that 5th place to 8th place battle last race came and went throughout the duration, but to have another opportunity for that will be exciting. He streams through with 5 minutes to go in qualifying. And look, like an improvement this lap. They're still sitting a half a second back from the 27 of San Filippo.
No, that was just a warm-up lap. I think he's on a flyer now as he heads down the straightaway. Watch him. We've seen a lot of drivers do that where they run along the right side of the racetrack and then halfway down under the Penske Bridge. That's when they transition over to the left side. And it's really due to the flow of the road. But these are streets, essentially, and they're kind of sort of banked off slightly away from the center line. And to cross over that, you kind of want to do it as straight as possible so you don't kind of get hung up on the center line of the road.
Yeah, Belle Isle in Detroit, very similar to Montreal's F1 circuit, where it's a city park most of the time, and then every once in a while they turn it into a racetrack or on these ring roads that surround the island. They're also reminiscent of Albert Park down in Australia. Owen Rolove goes into the wall. Not sure how practiced he might be. That could be an interesting point for the 39 if he's got the pace but not the consistency. We've seen how that plays out, and that could make it challenging for him for 25 minutes.
Certainly could. Still, San Filippo's continue to dominate this weekend. They dominated not only this weekend, but also over the course of the season. They've won most of the races that we've run. Patrick Woodstrup in the 3, Flavio Clavati down at the bottom of the order. I'm sure they'd like to improve in qualifying. 109.197 for Woodstrup, 109.432 for Clavati. We have 13 drivers entered in this one, and we'll see. I think we had 8 or 9 finish race 1. I'm hoping that we can get more finishing in race 2. Again, the attrition level here is really high just due to the challenges of this particular track.
Yeah, as we watch, is this Woodstrup that we're watching or Siemens? I'm not sure.
Woodstrup and over the top of his teammates. So
well,
that both.
I was gonna put a note out there about him, but now that we can't watch him, it's going to be tough to see. I was going to say, pay really close attention to the body language of those cars, specifically the drivers that have been struggling to break the top 10, top 8. You can see the body language of their cars are just visibly more nervous than the cars that are at the top, specifically the San Filippos. This is another good idea to watch right now. You can just see kind of the compliance over the bumps. The car rebounds from it pretty quickly. They don't oscillate for an extended period of time. They look very composed. If we cut away to somebody that's just right inside the top 10, I bet the bumps look very different from the body language of one of those other cars.
We can jump back up. Charlie Bass, he's also just found himself off the racetrack. Cody Sandwith is back in pit lane. Jolivet is out on track, and he's a little higher up the order. Siemens, I think, is also on track. We'll ride on board with him.
Siemens has done a good job to pick up some time. Just watch the body language through these bumps. You can see the car is not quite as happy over those bumps as it was when we rode with San Filippo a moment ago. The amount of time it takes to recover from those bumps is extended, and that comes down to setup.
So Jason Siemens works his way down the back straightaway into the tight right-hander. He'll make another one before he sweeps back out all the way up to the concrete on the front straightaway. 2.5 minutes left here in qualifying. And Siemens this time through, no improvement, 109.517, 2 seconds off his best. And sweeping down the back straight again. We're going to cut away for just a moment. We'll be back in a moment for the start of the Formula I F1 World Championship, second race of the day from Detroit, Belle Isle. We'll see you in a moment. back live here on Sim TV for the Formula I F1 World Championship, the second and final race of the day from Detroit, Belle Isle. My name is Kyle Heyer, joined by 4-time IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge winner and 2 times TC America champion as we get ready to roll here. 13 drivers on the grid for a 23-lap, 25-minute race. And you see the Sanfilippo brothers on the front row as they were at the end of the first race of the day here, Tom. Expectations and thoughts heading into the second and final race of the day.
Well, they were tighter on qualifying gaps, so I think watch the inside car, Marco Sanfilippo, left side of your screen. If he can take the lead early, I think he's got a good challenge. But on the second row, we have a new contender to challenge for third, and then that battle for fifth on back. Who knows? It's going to be very exciting to watch this one unfold. On
the front row, Danilo Sanfilippo, Marco Sanfilippo, 27 and 13 from the Fratelli Capone Corsa group. And on back in row number 2, Tom.
And that's Owen Jolivet, new for this race in the 39 car, starts third. And Cody Sandwith finished third last race, but qualifies fourth in the 32.
In row number 3, Corey Whiting in the number 12, Charlie Bass in the number 94. And the rest of the order scrolling on your screen as we are ready to go racing. As we've got 13 drivers, Steven Grabowski does not line up for this race. And 25 minutes of racing is underway. Green flag flies, and we're racing in Detroit. Belle Isle, the run down to turn 1. Danilo wins again as Marco down in second. There's Jolivet and Sandwith side by side. Oh, big contact for Sandwith. He's in the fence hard at the exit of turn number 2.
That was so close, and he's doing a good job keeping it out of the row of everybody else, and they make it through. Holy cow, that was tight, but the complete damage on the left front of or the right front of Sandwith's car, that's going to knock him out. Heartbreak, and that leaves Jolivet up in third. But a rocket start for Danilo Sanfilippo. He's checking out of this one already, does exactly what he needs to do to start a repeat.
So 2 drivers already with big trouble. Steven Grabowski did not grid. Cody Sandwith out with damage. Don Dace somehow got through that, but Danilo and Marco lead their way down into turn number 6. Jolivet follows in third right now, the bronze on the podium. I'm sure he'd love to finish there. Carlos Coutinho, top 5 in race number 1. Big understeer there on full tires.
Well, he had a tough race in race number 1. He qualified 5th, was as far back as 8th at one point, worked his way back. Whoa, it's a big push, and it's into the wall for Carlos Coutinho. Had started this one strong and now drops back through the field. How much damage is on that car? It almost looks like none.
Well, he might have gotten that left front suspension all banged up. The bodywork might not be too bad, but we'll see how it affects his lap time and pace. I can't imagine it's very good. These cars are pretty sensitive. I think he got the tire barrier instead of the concrete, so he should be able to continue without too much trouble. We'll see how much it affects him, though. So Sanfilippo's out front. 1 second separate them. Jolivet third, Whiting, then Siemens in 5th. Coutinho, Bass, Oliveira, Clavati, and Woodstrup the rest of your top 10.
It's an inverse of the end of last race. We saw Bass touch the wall. Coutinho ended up taking the position away. Now Coutinho has touched the wall, and Bass has the pressure on. But you can hear the 94 car tentative early in the race. Still getting the tires up to temperature, potentially coming onto the back straightaway to start lap number 2, or off for lap number 2. But watch for this 94 to put the pressure on Coutinho. Look at Siemens. Jason Siemens all the way up to 5th from 10th on the grid.
Great start for him, an opportunistic move. When he got around the stricken Cody Sandwith car, he managed to squeeze around the outside between him and the concrete. A good start. This would be a steal for him today. He has not had the pace to run 5th, so if he can finish there, that'd be great. But Coutinho, recovering from his moment, is tracking him back down.
You just think about the muscle memory that these drivers have after 25 minutes of racing and 2 pair of 20-minute qualifying session. They are absolutely dialed to Belle Isle here in Detroit, which means a driver like Jason Siemens, who may not have come out of the gate screaming early on today, probably has found not only quite a bit of pace, but a ton of confidence, and that's showing right now with running 5th. He's losing touch a little bit to Corey Whiting, who runs 4th. And it's another big gap up to Jolivet, but there's a mistake from Siemens. He was in deep, keeps it off the wall, but now Coutinho can put the pressure on.
And that was another big moment. I think he might have scraped the wall exiting turn number 3. He's in hot, almost gets the fence at the exit of 4. And I think that's a big concern, as he's really understeering big time. This has been a setup problem for that team all year long. They just get the car set up with way too much understeer in the front end. And here comes Coutinho up left side now. He'll make that pass complete on the back straightaway.
Yeah, it almost looks like Siemens allowed that one to go through. Look at how pushy that car still looks, the 15. Kind of dodging the exits of every single one of these corners. And now has fallen into the clutches of Charlie Bass. And that is now for 6th and 7th, as Siemens had run up in 5th. So the teammates, Whiting and Coutinho, back together, but separated by 3.5 seconds.
This has been a problem all year long for them. They just have not had the rotation that they need in these cars. They're so aero-dependent, but if you have the front end sliding and you can't get it turned in, you're just killing your mid-corner speed and your exit speed. So Siemens Again, you see the big push in middle of turn 1, climbs the curb, and that'll be a big push out of turn 2 as well. Cateau drives away.
It almost looks like Siemens is running a pretty low downforce setup. He was really fast in a straight line down that front straightaway, especially with the draft, as his teammate Patrick Woodstrup coming down the pit lane, which is never a good thing in a 25-minute sprint race. You're pretty much out of contention the moment that happens.
Yeah, replacing the front wing on that car, you see the front end damage, so he's gotten into the wall probably in the penultimate corner, which Finian had named the wall of death. It's been a lot of that today. We've seen a bunch of cars have trouble there. Cateau now tracking down the back straightaway. Siemens is closing back in. I think he'd like to continue this fight, and maybe there's some more temperature in those front tires now, but you see it's still understeering, almost catches the wall.
I think I heard a little nick. Really close to the wall on that one. But that number 15 car looks quick in a straight line. If he can keep the pressure on, that is going to make it easy to pass if he can be nice and close to the back of Cateau. But he's got to be careful because not only is Bass in the shot, but Esteverson Oliveira is in there as well, the pink front end.
Yeah, that's the F1 APS Silver Team car. His teammate, Flavio Clavati, is behind him by about 3.5 seconds. I'm sure they'd love to climb up the order a little bit. Look at the teammates again. Sanfilippo and Sanfilippo at the top of the order in the Fratelli Capone Corsa colors, then Whiting and Cateau in white coat F1, they're nose to tail, and so is Oliveira and Clavati. All the teammate groups that are here are running tandem right now as it stands.
Looks like that battle at the front is very similar, almost completely carbon copy from race 1, as they've ebbed and flowed between 1.2 and 1.5 seconds. Danilo has a little bit of the advantage right now, but mid-race last time through, Marco Sanfilippo, who we're watching now in second, he had some really fast laps and was able to claw the distance down to only about a second. So if he can continue that trend at some point in this race, we got 20 minutes left, he might be able to get back up to the back bumper, the back wing of Danilo at the lead. I just think it's going to be really tough to pull off.
Yeah, Danilo was a little bit faster last time, 0.2 better than Marco. We'll see if that changes this time through. 107.635 to 107.729. That time Danilo still a little bit faster, but under a 10th quicker. So Marco, I think he's starting to build in that longer run pace that he had in race number 1.
Owen Jolivet is doing a better job to keep in contact with these drivers. He can still see them down the longest straightaways. He's only about a half a straightaway back from them, so it's 4.8 seconds on the board. That looks like a lot, but with how fast these cars are, it's really not a ton. And I don't know that he's got the pace to start to run them down necessarily, but he's keeping the pressure on, so if anything happens, he's within striking distance.
Always that possibility. I mentioned earlier in the first race of the night how Danilo and Marco had Road America on lockdown and ended up both having issues and led to Ben Fuller winning that opening race of the season. So there's still the possibility that while Danilo and Marco have been pretty much perfect tonight, that perfection doesn't always last for the entire event. Siemens now trying to run Cateau back down 7/10 between them, and Charlie Bass still 1 second back. He was a little slower last time in that TNT Racing 94, but still in the fight for 5th.
15 of Siemens in the middle of his sandwich looks like it's starting to come to him. The car looked a little more lively. He's hitting the apexes, not dodging the walls on exits nearly as much. Again, I think that car is fast in a straight line. There's a little bit of a push. Oh, he touches the wall that time. Doesn't dodge the bullet at the 2 times in a row. And unfortunately, Siemens probably picked up a little bit of damage, which is going to put him back in the clutches of Bass. Look at the 94 car closing up the yellow one.
Through that corner again, if you hit the wall square and not that hard, you might be okay. It's just when you kind of hit it at an angle, you can knock your suspension in and your wings in. So if you get it square enough, you can kind of land on the face of the wheel and it can kind of absorb that impact. I don't really recommend doing that, but you might be able to get away with it.
The other thing is Jason Siemens looks very comfortable hitting the curbs. He's climbing them all over the place, and we've seen that be a death sentence for pretty much everybody else when they touch him. He's doing it corner after corner. So that 15 car may be a little bit softer than the rest of them, faster in a straight line with a lower downforce. I bet that's not necessarily the fastest setup for these cars, but it is maybe a little bit more forgiving. Watch him pound this curb. Misses it this time, actually, but it's closed it up. That straight line speed of the 15. It's closed the gap back down to Cateau despite that contact.
Yeah, and you talk about the curbing here. It's not normal curbing like you'd expect to see at an FIA grade circuit. They're basically covering up what is essentially just concrete sidewalk curbing with a ramp. You see them real tight through that corner. But it's basically just steel plates that ramp up to sidewalk curbing. So they're very sharp and tall, and if you get up on top of them, you're going to basically spin these cars out. But Siemens has been able to use them to his advantage today, helping hook that understeering car around the corner.
He almost touched that wall once again in the penultimate corner that we pointed out. So 2 for 2. He's dropped off of the back bumper of Cateau just a little bit up. A huge gap up to Whiting, so this battle for 5th has pretty much isolated itself now with the top 4 cars running away big time, but somehow Jason Siemens, even with that big slide, continuing to maintain pressure on the back of Coteau, but he's on the ragged edge. I think he's a mistake away from succumbing to the pressure from the 94.
I think that might be the case. We saw that big moment coming out of turn number 4. Kind of a tank slapper he caught. Fast behind him. You can watch how close he gets to the wall on corner exit, just flirting with major damage every time. That car is going to belong in a junkyard after this race. If he survives or not, he's probably banged in enough wings and carbon pieces that there's not a whole lot salvageable probably. Charlie Bass is watching from behind in 7th. I'm sure he'd like to run back inside the top 5. Remember, he lost 5th position on the final lap of the first race.
2.5 minutes remaining, so we're closing in on half distance. This one's going a lot faster. Whoa, another almost touch maybe for Siemens on the wall exiting turn 2. Creston, and looked like the back of the car might have caught the concrete. And these, big dive, look at that, up the inside. And
wow.
Bass misses the corner completely, straight into the tires. And Siemens saw it coming, knew there was no way that was going to work. We're going to take another look at it.
Yeah, that was just completely missing the braking zone. He's going to go up the inside and just bails out and just couldn't get it stopped. That's a wild wreck to happen at a braking zone where you're entering about 180 miles an hour.
The Siemens almost touches the wall exiting turn 2, and Bass gets a run. Maybe a little bit of target fixation, super late on the brakes. There was no way that was going to work. I think he actually was dodging more than making a lunge at the position. Siemens saw it coming, delayed its turn in just a little bit to dodge the hurtling numbers 94 up the inside.
Oliveira and Jason Siemens now fighting for 6. Siemens is around.
Locks it down on the brakes and saves it. That was another bullet dodge. This 15 has been ragged and rowdy this entire race. Still managing to keep it pointed mostly in the right way and mostly off the walls, at least enough to continue circulating. He's down to 7th with Oliveira, the big beneficiary of all of that chaos. The number 30's up to 6th.
It's really difficult to spin a car out at Belle Isle and not hit something, and that's what Siemens just did. I'll take that as a win in my book. Up in front, Danilo and Marco still separated by 1.8 seconds, 14 minutes to go. Jolivet is keeping pace with them, is actually quicker than Marco Sanfilippo last time around.
Be tough to overcome that 4-second gap between the two, but not impossible, especially if Marco Sanfilippo makes another mistake. He did in race 1, in fact, in the last 4 or 5 laps of that race, make a mistake to drop himself well off the rear of Danilo, his teammate. And right now, Jolivet's within that distance where Sanfilippo Marco, the 13 car, ended up.
And Jolivet ran his best lap a lap ago. That time was significantly slower. 108.572. That's 0.6 off of what Marco just ran, so he lost some more ground this time through. This one, this race, I think we've seen a bit more early attrition. 3 drivers completely out. Grabowski that did not start. Sandwith and Bass with major damage. Woodstrup came to pit lane to replace that front wing. He's back out on the racetrack right now, but again, struggling with pace this afternoon. Danilo and Marco, 1.6 separating them. And Marco is now equal pace with Danilo. I wonder if he can run Danilo back down, if he can avoid that mistake like he made in race 1.
Well, it's going to be tough, but he has gained almost 0.3 of a second so far this lap. They're not even completed with the lap yet. We saw in race number 1, the 13 car took about half the race to kind of get up to speed, and then throughout the middle of the race had laps that were quicker than Danilo Sanfilippo, but Danilo in the 27 had the consistency to maintain the point.
Watching Marco right now through the penultimate corner. Nice, good flow through here. Now back out onto the front straightaway. We should see this delta go positive for Danilo, meaning that Marco has made up some ground. 108 flat for Danilo, 107.4 for Marco. So that's a 0.5 gain for Marco that time through. Patrick Woodstrup a lap down now. As remember that blue flags are not optional. They are a compulsory pull-over flag when they are displayed. So Patrick had to give that lap away and runs down in 10th place. 12 minutes to go. Now some lap traffic for Danilo. That's Don Day in the number 4. That's a gain for Marco again. Now the gap under a full second. 0.8 as they head down into turn number 6.
This is the closest it's been at any stage other than qualifying here today at Belle Isle. Look at that, down to 0.6 of a second through this really tight handling section. The number 13 that we ride along with just looks tight and tidy, but there's a push coming off to the wall of death. He avoids it, but gets within the striking distance, and that's also within the aero wash distance of the back of the 27, and he starts to fall back off. So I think he might have a hard time running any closer than he is right now.
For 7th place, Flavio Clavati and Jason Siemens going at it. Siemens again with the mistake earlier, looping it, wall of death corner, trying to run that 71 car back down.
He's still in this one, though, in the 8th position, and he's within about a half a second, or is at a full second, close to Clavati. These drivers have dropped almost 15 seconds off the back of Oliveira, so they're very isolated on the track right now, but we've seen a lot of speed out of the 15. I'm not sure how much of it's left, as he's seen a number of contacts with the wall, a number of near spins. He might have just kind of lost some confidence after all of that attrition that he dodged, but he's still maintaining pressure on the back of the 71.
Actually, I think he had lost this position already because his last time was a 1:15.1. So somewhere along the way, he's had another moment. And with 10 minutes to go, we're well past the halfway point now. It should be 10 laps to go this time through. And Danilo and Marco still separated by 1.3. That gap has sort of evened itself back out as Siemens gets the fence at the exit of turn 2. That's day over, Tom.
Yeah, that might be the final nail in the coffin. He'd been flirting with it the entire time, but gets a little bit of a push turning back for turn 2, and as soon as he crests the hill there, he gets behind, turns in early, catches some curb on the way in, and unfortunately, day done for that 15 car who had caused so much excitement early on and had a good run going until it just started to go sideways.
Figuratively and literally, he's out for the day. It's been a poor afternoon for the Siemens Privateer team. He will finish unofficially in 10th as Patrick Woodstrup, his teammate. As long as he makes it around another lap, he will assume 9th place. That kind of eliminates most of the battles we were watching. I think we'll have to focus back forward on Danilo and Marco for now. 1.4 second gap. Both drivers, I think, are been inconsistent today. 107.6 and 108.5 at every lap. It changes back and forth.
Well, and fatigue has to start kicking in at some point, even for the strongest drivers. We've been circulating laps again over a 25-minute race 1 plus 2 20-minute sessions. We're now 15 minutes into race number 2, and this place is so demanding. We talked about how little margin for error there is, how bumpy it is, how challenging and how quick it is. It's a very high speed but low margin for error track, and you just mentally start to fatigue at some point. So I wouldn't be surprised to see these drivers continue to drop off. That lap is actually really weak for Danilo Sanfilippo. Look at Marco Sanfilippo now. It was 8/10, and then it kind of ebbed back. Maybe some inconsistency in timing and scoring actually catching me off there, but these two, even if they're the strongest cars in the field, at some point, you just start to feel that wear on you.
So down to the final 8.5 minutes of this race. Moving back to 5th place, Carlos Couteau in the number 22. He's been having a pretty consistent afternoon in this particular race. He started this event in 7th. He's gained 2 spots and basically hung out there. If he could get 2 top 5s and they could get White Coat F1, top 5s for both their drivers in both races, that's a massive success for this afternoon. We head to Bathurst next week. That's a super challenging racetrack for Formula 1 cars. I don't know how that's going to go, but I think Carlos and Corey will have a bit of a buffer on those other drivers that they're fighting in the championship.
Yeah, I'm not sure you could top the difficulty that is Belle Isle other than Bathurst. So we got 2 of the toughest tracks in the iRacing service available to us back-to-back in the Formula I World Championship series here.
Now, the other thing is that after Bathurst, there's only 3 rounds remaining in the season. Circuit of the Americas on December 5th. December 19th is Imola, and then on January 2nd, Spa-Francorchamps is our final round of the season. So we go from Montreal, Detroit, and Bathurst to Coda, Imola, and Spa, 3 tracks that are sort of designed with Formula 1 in mind and are probably feel a bit less claustrophobic after a couple street courses.
Yeah, it'll certainly be a relief for these drivers, I have to imagine, and I wouldn't be surprised to see more cars start to come back with those more traditional circuits. I think these tracks can be intimidating, and it might scare some people away, to be honest. So to maybe fill out the field a little bit more in those final weeks at some very traditional and famous racetracks for Formula 1, but in general, will be very cool. Up at the front, it looks like Marco Sanfilippo has made another mistake that has allowed the gap to climb up to 2.5 seconds this time. That would have put him pretty close to Jolivet, but Jolivet's pace has wavered as well and has dropped him now close to 9 seconds out first, 7 seconds out of second.
7 minutes to go, and I'm really excited for Coda next week. Actually, I think it's a couple weeks from now on December 5th, but I'm excited for Coda. I have gained an appreciation for that racetrack that I did not have about a year and a half ago. I got to visit there this season working for World Challenge, and there's something about it that it doesn't translate very well to the sim world, Tom, and I know you've raced there. What are your thoughts on Coda as a racetrack? Because I appreciated it way more when I got to go out there in the real world.
Well, I think it has a lot more character than it's given on television and on just lapping. It's definitely got a lot of character and a lot of nuance to it. And I also like that it kind of has two personalities. You have the first half of the lap, which is turns, basically call it turns 2 to 10. Those are the S's, and they all link together. Lewis Hamilton says it's the best sequence of corners anywhere on the planet, and I don't necessarily disagree with him. It's a ton of fun to link all those corners together, and they're fast flowing. And then you get a little bit of a break, and then it's kind of very point and shoot. Off of the back straight at turn 12, 13, 15, 20, and turn 1 even will lump in there. Those are all very more get the car slowed down, pointed, and shoot it to the next corner as quickly as you can. So you have almost 2 tracks in one, with the front straight and the back straight breaking it up, which means that there's kind of 2 tracks to learn almost as well. You have to have a car that's good in both types of corners. And I think once you've driven it or even seen it in real life, the character, the nuance, and that challenge starts to stand out more than you would see just from watching it as a casual spectator.
Oh, big moment there for Jolivet. How about Jolivet just jumping in here in the second race with seemingly very little practice, and he's running inside the podium spots right now. I think this is a fantastic day for him, and certainly be a high points day. And considering his season hasn't been incredible in terms of finishing order, I think he'll be very happy with the third place finish.
Well, and it's well earned too, because, I mean, calling back to what we talked about early, this is a track where you race the track as much as you're racing other drivers. So he's probably had wheel-to-wheel races that are less intense than this solo flight that he's having here in third place. And he's running very similar lap times to the 13 car that sits second. So perhaps if he had run that first race, he might be able to stick onto the back of the San Filippo's up towards the front. But I suspect he was still within the learning curve of the week early on, and now is just kind of finding his groove.
So Formula I F1 World Championship racing about to be complete in about 4.5 minutes. What's coming up on Sim TV this week? Well, tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central, the Outsider Racing League heads to Chicagoland, Joliet, Illinois, not too far away from where we're sitting right now. That'll be again at 10 o'clock Eastern tonight. Then tomorrow, the SRO America Esports Championship heads to Spa for the 6-hour endurance race. It'll be myself and Tom O'Gorman and Ryan Marine announcing that race tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern, noon Central. Then on Monday, I think we're off. Tuesday, the Fuel Mission 22 Premier Series heads to Texas for their season finale. Wednesday, the DC Region SCCA iRacing League, they will head to Sebring for a 90-minute race before we head to Thursday evening racing for Scars Ferrari Challenge from Mount Panorama at Bathurst. So lots coming up this week, all sorts of different kinds of racing here on Sim TV. But looking forward to tomorrow's 6 hours of Spa with the SRO America Esports. Then, of course, Tuesday, NASCAR at Texas. That feels very right to me, NASCAR at Texas. So that'll be fun. That'll be at 8 p.m. Or excuse me, 9 p.m. Eastern. I'm still getting used to the time zone shift here, Tom.
Continue to watch Owen Jolivet sweeps around the lap traffic of Flavio Clavati in the background there, and his pace has wavered a little bit. Honestly, I don't know that it's wavered so much as Marco Sanfilippo has actually picked the pace up, turned the afterburners on, and put that gap from 2.5 a couple of laps ago down to 1.6. That 13 car is back on it in a big way.
Yeah, we're down to about 2 laps to go. Big sweep out to the concrete in turn 3, then back into turn 4. Oh, he gets the fence! That's damage there. I'm not sure if it'll be significant. He might have just caught it with the tire. I don't see a lot of wing damage on it, so he might have gotten away with it, Tom, but that was could have been a big mistake. Jolivet, trouble.
Oh no, it looks like the nose cone's missing. He stuffed that car somewhere. Big damage on the left side as well. This is down into turn number 3, a section that we've seen other drivers get caught out. Watch how bumpy it gets in the braking zone. Does he kiss the wall? No, he's just in too hot.
This track's out.
Actually, that wasn't in turn 3. Look at that. He caught the grass on the way into turn 4. That's such a fast corner, over 100 miles an hour in an F1 car, and it just goes for a big slide. Pancakes into the tires, and what we had been talking about, such a good run for Owen Jolivet, ends in heartbreak, which is promoted now as Stiverson Oliveira up into the top 5.
Yeah, Stiverson Oliveira goes to the top 5, and Corey Whiting will pick up a podium if he can finish this out. That'd be a fantastic day. He's been on the podium a couple times lately. I'm sure he'd love to finish this one out. Works his way through penultimate corner. About a minute and a half left remaining in this race. Danilo and Marco Sanfilippo should be coming to the white flag next time by. And Danilo could sweep both races here this afternoon, and it would continue to lead the championship by a significant margin.
Marco Sanfilippo a lap ago on this straightaway, dodging a bullet big time. He kissed the inside wall and has only dropped about a half a second off. So the pace of that car looks okay as he's actually now closing in towards the leader. for a couple of corners, but it's now stagnated right about 2 seconds. I really think at some point or some alternate universe, the 13 car could have won a race today, but the 27 has just been too consistent, too picture perfect.
Coming to the white flag here at, oh, it's going to be close. 1 minute 11. Is this final lap? Oh, it's going to be tight. I don't have the official white flag moniker here on the timing and scoring, but when it's close, I'm never really sure what it's going to be. We'll see when we come back around out of the final corner. But Danilo Sanfilippo, Marco Sanfilippo, 1.9 seconds between them. No other major battles on the racetrack. They've all fizzled, but big attrition. Jolivet, Siemens, Bass, Sandwith, and Grabowski all out with crash damage.
Well, you say that, but I'm looking down. It looks like 4th and 5th, Cateau and Oliveira. I think Cateau might have made a mistake, and they're fairly close to each other on the track with about, what, a 1.8 second gap between the two. There is Cateau, and there's Oliveira with the pink front end just behind. So something could happen here for 5th and 4th, but it's unlikely. The closest battle is still, look at Marco Sanfilippo down to 1.7 seconds. The 13 will not quit.
Well, I wonder if Danilo is going to lift here and just slow up about a second or two. He's got some time to burn, and I think he'd rather slow up and take the checkered this time by than go another full lap here. So as he comes out of the final corner, is he coming to the checkers or the white? I think it's going to be white flag this time by. Danilo Sanfilippo finally comes back around. And now it's a 2 second gap for Marco to close.
Yeah, he had the opportunity to lift last time and make it one to go, but he didn't. So they're going to get a kind of a bonus lap here. And now the gap is closed to 1.5 seconds between the two. It would have benefited the 27 to call it a day if he had manipulated that gap just a little bit better. And this one is now coming alive. Look at Esteverson Oliveira is within a couple of car lengths of Carlos Cateau.
And remember, they're so far back that they're going to have another full lap of racing to run. So that was a bit of understeer there for both those cars, but now it's a full second gap. But they still have a couple miles of racing left to go.
Last time through, Esteverson Oliveira was only 1.5 seconds off of the race leader on raw pace. He actually took out, what is that, close to a second out of the lead that he had, or the gap to Carlos Cateau. At the front, less than a second between the leaders as they're coming through the last couple of corners. I think the opportunities are gone, but a valiant effort from the 13 actually slows over and allows to take the lead. Team orders potentially.
Out of fuel. Danilo Sanfilippo is out of fuel in the final corner. He ran that car out of fuel, and that is a big mistake. I thought it was team orders too, Tom. I thought he pulled over to let his teammate win, but it was not so. Danilo out of fuel by 1 corner, and Marco Sanfilippo wins the race by 3.5 seconds because of a small fueling miscalculation.
Unbelievable, and you have to bet that was down to starting the final lap with 1 second to go. I bet he factored it was one less lap than it was. Completing 23, he suspected it was going to be 22, I bet. Now we look at the battle for 4th and 5th. Cateau and Oliveira. Olivia tries to square the car up, get a good run. It's going to be tough to do at this point because these final corners are so fast, but not impossible. Does Cateau make it through cleanly? Yes, which is now pretty much a straight shot all the way to start-finish.
All the way to the line, Carlos Cateau, 5th in race number 1, 4th in race number 2. Oliveira, top 5 run here. Think back to race number 1, though, with the situation with the leaders, Tom. The race was 22 laps. Marco ran a little bit faster this time around and made that extra lap happen, and that's what cost him the race. So that was sort of a self-inflicted wound there, unfortunately. However, for the team, still a very good day. They'll both sweep the races. Danilo and Marco 1st and 2nd in race 1, and then Marco and Danilo in race number 2. Let's have a look here at our race results. Of course, the shocking last lap change in position between the two Italians at the top of the order. Marco gets another victory this season. Corey Whiting rounds out the podium in the number 12, and the other white coat F1 driver, Carlos Cateau, 4th in this race. And then the Team F1 APS silver cars, Stevenson Oliveira and Flavio Clavati, 5th and 6th. Woodstrup, 7th, a lap down. Don Day pulls off a top 10. And Jolivet on down, all crash damage to end their day. But that was a little bit more chaotic at the end there, Tom, with a couple battles and a leader out of fuel.
Yeah, it's a plot twist we didn't see coming, and I was going to say it's almost insult to injury with Danilo having the opportunity to lift a little bit and make it the white flag. He didn't do the mental calculation. I think he was just in the zone cruising, and if you're correct with the way the point structure works here, that means it's a win for both Marco and Danilo in the points season. Is that right?
I think so. So, again, we head off to Bathurst next week where things return to normal with our knockout qualifying format and our about an hour-long race. Then Circuit of the Americas, Imola, and Spa to finish out the season. The Formula 3 series did not meet the minimum vehicle requirement today to have that race, so we're going to hope that they'll have more cars at Bathurst, and we'll see you there in 1 week on November 21st. From Mount Panorama Bathurst, my name's Kyle Heyer with Tom O'Gorman. Tom, thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next week.